Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back again with another historical video. And today we are continuing in our Cold War unit, and today we are focusing back on China. So we've already had a lecture about China, and your book gives a whole section, a whole lesson just solely based for China, and a lot of stuff happens that kind of sets it up for the Cold War era that we're looking at. So yeah, there you go. That's the title. China after World War II. That was your warm up. Okay, objectives. We're going to draw conclusions about why Mao believed that only permanent revolution was important. We're going to summarize China's relationship with the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War and identify the causes and effects of the Great Leap Forward. All right. So before World War II started, the middle of the 30s, there was a uh, Chinese Civil War. You could almost say from the end of World War One to the beginning of World War II, there was some unrest in China. And so now, after World War II ends, the two sides, even though they joined forces to defeat or try and resist the Japanese occupation in China during World War II. After that, they said, no more truce. We're going to fight each other. So the nationalist government led by Chiang Kai-shek, based in southern and central China, was supported by the United States. And on the other side, you have the communists led by Mao Zedong, building a strong communist base in northern China. And by the end of World War II, 20 to 30 million Chinese people were living under communist rule, and the People's Liberation Army of the communists included about 1 million troops. There were efforts to form a coalition government, some communists, some nationalists, but that failed in 1946. So a full scale civil war broke out between the two. In the countryside, there were promises of land that attracted millions of peasants to the Communist Party, and many joined Mao's People's Liberation Army, the PLA. In the cities, middle class Chinese who were alienated by Chiang Kai-shek's repressive policies now supported the communists. So they weren't getting any love from their leader, so they're going to go to the other side. Chiang's troops began to defect to the communists. Sometimes whole divisions, from officers to soldiers, will change sides. That's not good if you're trying to, start a new, start a revolution or stop one. So Chiang Kai-shek on the left, Mao Zedong, a young Mao Zedong on the right. And this is China, Japanese occupation. So Chinese nationalists were all in green, and communists were up here. And this is the area of China that was invaded during World War II, 1931, by the Japanese. And yeah, we talked about the Long March. Okay, so this is 1949. Red, People's Government of North China, and then you have the Republic of China in all the different states. Here are some pictures of the Civil War. All right, Red October. So by 1948, the PLA had surrounded Beijing, the capital. The following spring, it crossed the Changjiang River, or the Yangtze River, and they will occupy Shanghai. During the next few months, Chiang Kai-shek and 2 million followers will flee to the island of Formosa, aka modern-day Taiwan. And October, that should be 49. 49. I can't fix it. So that's this right here should be October 1st, 1949. October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong mounted a rostrum, which is just a podium, and at the gate of Heavenly Peace in Beijing, he'll make a victory statement to thousands of people who gathered in the square before him, proudly saying the Chinese people have stood up and nobody will insult us again. So there's that. I don't know who's insulting whom, but maybe that's a translation issue. Nobody will insult us again. Insult means probably something different, probably a different word. And here you have perpetual motion. You have nationalist government versus the communists, and they're two heads of a dragon fighting against each other. A plague on both your houses, Uncle Sam says, and a termination of U.S. participation in peace efforts. So that's, again, an older Chiang Kai-shek, and this is Taiwan. This is where they fled to, aka Formosa. And look at this GIF. I got a GIF in here. So red is the communists, and over time, they take over the country. So there you go. A mouthful of false teeth. You have peace talks. Red China's ambition in East Asia. China is. I'm guessing this is supposed to be a dragon. China is also referenced as a dinosaur. Remember? So I showed a political cartoon about that being a dinosaur. Here's Mao Zedong giving that speech that day. Here are people listening to what he has to say. All right, collective dreams. So the Communist Party was under the leadership of Chairman Mao Zedong ruling China in 1955. The Chinese government will launch a new program to build a socialist society. And virtually all private farmland was collectivized. And that kind of sounds a lot like the Soviet Union under Stalin before World War II. Peasant families were allowed to keep small plots for their private use, but they worked chiefly in large collective farms. Even the elite members of society were also made to work on collective farms. In addition, most industry and commerce would be nationalized, meaning the government owns it, not any foreign country. And that's the whole thing, right? During World War II, you have Japan trying to kick out the foreigners in Asia, making Asia for Asians. And now that Japan's out, China, remember spheres of influence, they rented out land for foreign countries who wanted to trade with Japan, take resources, trade with China, take resources from China, and take it back home and sell it for more and pay them less, paying China less. So China wants to get rid of the foreigners. Chinese leaders hoped collective farms would increase food production, allowing for more people to work in industry. However, food production did not grow, even though China's vast population continued to expand. And this is called I think is it the famine? It's a big, great famine. And by 1957, around 657 million people had died. Or no. Mr. Ovalle can't read his own typing. In 1957, the population of China was about 657 million people. That's so many people. I believe there are only over 300 million. Obviously, nowadays, probably 350 million people living in the United States. Hey Siri, what's the population of the United States?
As of 2021, the population of the United States was
332 million living in the United States right now. And back then, like it was so long ago, 1957, 657 million. America hasn't even reached that capacity, you know? So trying to show people working in collective farms, okay? Your book says that, well, I think I'm going to talk about it on the next slide, but there are about 20,000 people, 30,000 people working in collective farms. And, you got propaganda trying to make it look like a good thing. Look how happy they look. More happiness. However, it was not so great. In 1958, Mao began a more radical program known as the Great Leap Forward. Despite under his program, over 700,000 existing collective farms, normally the size of a village, were combined into 26,000 vast communes. Each commune contained more than 30,000 people who lived and worked together. Because each Because they had communal childcare, more than 500,000 Chinese mothers worked beside their husbands by mid 1958. Mao hoped this program would mobilize the people for a massive effort to speed up economic growth to reach the final stage of communism, the classless society, according to Karl Marx, before the end of the 20th century. The Communist Party's official slogan promised the following to the Chinese people: hard work for a few years, happiness for 1,000. Your test questions, though, are: despite these slogans, the GLF, uh, Great Leap Forward, GLF, was an economic disaster. Bad weather resulted in droughts and floods, and peasants' hatred to this new system drove down food production. And as a result, nearly 15 million people died due to starvation. Many peasants were reportedly reduced to eating the bark off trees, and in some cases, starving infants. In 1960, the government made some changes by breaking up communes and they returned to collective farms and some private plots because they realized how bad it was. So these are, again, propaganda posters about the Great Leap Forward, um, tilling the land, working the land, and then resistance. Children eating in communes, starvation, sad pictures, man, sad pictures. Yeah. All right, Little Red Riding Hood. So, despite the opposition within the Communist Party and the commune failure, Mao still dreamed of a classless society. Again, he's reading Karl Marx verbatim, literally. In Mao's eyes, only permanent revolution, an atmosphere of constant revolutionary fervor, could enable the Chinese to overcome the past to achieve the final stage of communism. So, in 1966, 8 years later, Mao launches the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. In the Chinese name, it literally meant Great Revolution to create a proletarian culture. A collection of Mao's thoughts were produced called the Little Red Book, and it would become sort of Bible-like, Bible-esque for the Chinese communists. It was hailed as one of the most important sources of knowledge in all areas. This book was in every hotel, every school, and factories, communes, and universities. Few people conversed without referring to the Little Red Book. To further the Cultural Revolution, Red Guards were formed. These were revolutionary groups formed of unhappy party members and discontented young people. They were urged to take to the streets to cleanse Chinese society of impure elements guilty of taking the capitalist road. In June 1966, all schools and universities were closed for 6 months to prepare for a new system of education based on Mao's ideas. Mao launched China on a new forced march toward communism. And, can you imagine nowadays, like, schools closing to what you believe? That's what kids are gonna learn. And there's a lot of people in China, and in order to mass produce it, get people on board, teach it to the kids. The kids are the future. So, again, Mao is like God to them. So, all these pictures. Hey, I saw that picture before. Red destruction. So the Red Guard set across the nation to eliminate the four olds: old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits. Doesn't seem good for trying to eliminate your history. The Red Guards destroyed temples, books written by foreigners, and foreign music. They tore down street signs and replaced them with ones carrying revolutionary names. The Red Guards even turned on members of the Communist Party. The city of Shanghai even ordered that red traffic lights would be indicated that traffic could move, not stop. That's kind of funny. Destruction of property was matched by vicious attacks on individuals who supposedly deviated from Mao's thoughts. Those so accused were humiliated at public meetings where they were forced to admit to their crimes. Many were brutally beaten, often fatally. Intellectuals and artists accused of being pro-Western were especially open to attack. Red Guards broke the fingers of one pianist for the crime of playing the works of Frederick Chopin, a 19th century European composer. Yeah. Yen Chang, who worked for the British, owned the shell company in Shanghai. He would be in prison for 7 years, and her experiences were collected in a book titled "Life and Death in Shanghai." Can you imagine owning a gas station that was foreign owned, and then that's how you made your money, but now because it was a foreign-owned company in China, you were arrested for it. This is public shaming. More public shaming. Brutally beaten people for being pro-Western or admitting to it. Don't know if that's such a good thing. From the start of its socialist revolution, the Communist Party had wanted to create a new kind of citizen, one who would give the utmost for the good of all China. In Mao's words, the people should be resolute, fear no sacrifice, and surmount every difficulty to win victory. During the 50s and 60s, the Chinese government made some basic changes. Women could now partake in politics and had equal marital rights, which was a dramatic shift. Mao feared that loyalty to the family would interfere with loyalty to the state, so making the man and the woman equal. There you go. During the Cultural Revolution, for example, children were encouraged to report negative comments that their parents made about the government. Ooh, imagine that. Snitches get stitches. Mao found during the Cultural Revolution that it's not easy to maintain permanent revolution or constant mood of revolutionary enthusiasm. Key groups, including the Communist Party members and military officers, did not share Mao's desire for permanent revolution. So it's like, okay, now what do we do? Do we keep furthering it? It sounds a lot like the French Revolution, if you can compare. Always wanting to change, 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 change. And it's chaotic and nothing's really happening. And some people are tired of the chaos and they just want normalcy to happen. Enter Napoleon. Remember? Many people were disgusted by the actions of the Red Guards, so they began to turn against the government. In September 1976, Mao Zedong died at the age of 82. And a group of practical-minded reformers led by Deng Xiaoping seized power and soon brought the Cultural Revolution to an end because it ended in 1976. Again, here are people being pro-Western, Red Guards attacking, more Red Guards attacking, a dead Mao. R.I.P. No longer alive. I believe this is Deng Xiaoping in earlier years. All right, Cold China. In 1949, the Cold War spread from Europe to Asia when the Chinese communists won the Chinese Civil War and set up a new communist regime. American fears about the spread of communism intensified when the new Chinese communist leaders made it clear that they supported national wars of liberation or movements of revolution in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So when Communist China signed a pact of friendship and cooperation with the Soviet Union in 1950, Americans began to speak of communist desire for world domination. So when war broke out in Korea, the Cold War had actually arrived in Asia. China's involvement in the Korean War led to new Western fears about China. In return, China became even more isolated from the major Western powers. The country was forced to rely on entirely on support from the Soviet Union for technological and economical aid, even though they were going through their own thing, you know what I'm saying? From one communist country to another. Even that became more difficult as relations between China and the Soviet Union began to sour and deteriorate in the late 50s. So here's Mao and Stalin. Pro-Chinese countries in yellow, pro-Soviet countries in red, neutral communist countries in black. There's Mao and Nikita Khrushchev. All right, Sino-Soviet issues. Several issues divided China and the Soviet Union. For one thing, the Chinese were unhappy with the amount of economic aid provided by the Soviets. They had no money. A more important issue was their disagreement over the Cold War. The Chinese wanted the Soviets to go on the offensive and promote the world revolution. Specifically, China wanted Soviet aid in retaking Taiwan from Chiang Kai-shek, because as long as there was support there would always be rebels. The Soviets, however, were trying to improve relations with the West and refused. In the 60s, the dispute between China and the Soviet Union broke out into the open. Military units on both sides of their frontiers clashed on a number of occasions. Faced with internal problems and serious security threats from the Soviets on the northern frontier, some Chinese leaders decided to improve relations with the United States. In 1972, President Richard Nixon made a state visit to China, where the two sides agreed to improve relations between China's long isolation from the West coming to an end. President Nixon met with Mao Zedong. But the end of the Cultural Revolution also affected Chinese foreign policy. In the late 70s, Deng Xiaoping and China sought to improve relations with Western states. Diplomatic ties were established with the U.S. in 1979, and in the 1990s, Chinese relations with the Soviet Union were improved. By the 1980s. By the 1990s, China emerged as an independent power and began to display increasingly active role in Asia affairs. So there's again Stalin actually with Mao Zedong. These are the heads. If there could be a Mount Rushmore of um, communist leaders, you have Marx and Engels, and then you have Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. Filthy imperialist, that's supposed to be the sickle of the Soviet Union and the hammer of Mao, building a wall for, the frontier battles because the Soviet Union and China border each other in some parts, and this is the disputed area. And here's it was called the I don't think it was called the Sino-Soviet War, but, you know, hey, man, we need to stop fighting each other. Here's Richard Nixon with Mao Zedong. Before Donald Trump visited, I believe in, what was that, 2017? He was the only president since to visit China. So from 1972, so that's about what, 35 years, if I do my math correctly, or 45 years. And hey, that's that. That's it. So yeah, that's, I know I started talking quicker at the end, but that's the end of the lecture. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. It was kind of shorter, but there were some test questions up in there that are going to be on your final exam. And so yeah, keep it short and sweet. Let's not prolong this outro. Your homework is page 493, 2 through 4. Page 493, 2 through 4. All right, if you guys did enjoy that, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Burrs.